nature's not going to lie to you. It's been doing it for centuries. It's a lot calmer. Now, this is my 3rd year of doing it here, and I can tell you the first year of planting was guesswork. And I understand what you beginners are going through. It was guesswork, it was angst, it was anticipation, it was self-doubt. Did I do it on time? It was really stressful. Do you want the perfect garden planner? Well, it's not going to come from a calendar, it's not going to come from an app, and it's not even going to come from me. It's going to come from you, and it's going to come from nature. Nature's going to give us the signals that we need to plant our garden this spring. Let's go in after the garden, we'll talk about it a little bit more. Now, when I talk about a natural planting cycle or using nature's clues, I'll give you an example. Over there in that birdhouse, the bluebirds just showed up from their migration. Also, yesterday or 2 days ago, the wisteria started blooming in my front yard. And then over here, my pear trees, the petals have just started falling off the pear tree, and then now it's starting to turn green. I just saw my first bumblebee. I just saw my first butterfly. And to me, that's an indication that it's time to transplant my tomatoes. Now, I can do this for my entire spring planting session. I know exactly when to plant, when to seed, and when to transplant. And I do that by using the clues nature gives us, and it all hinges on one thing, and that's soil temp. Let's go ahead and talk about that for just a minute. So what does soil temp have to do with planting of your garden? Well, everything. As the soil starts to warm up in the spring, things start happening. Microbes become more active. They start ingesting more nutrients that alerts the plant, hey, it's time to start growing again. 2, bugs start waking up and saying it's time for me to get active to start pollinating the plants. They also provide a food source for the birds that are migrating from the south up to the north. All of this happens and it gives us indication. Now, I use 4 different temperatures of my soil. I'll use a 50 degrees, a 60 degrees, a 70 degrees, and an 80 degrees. But before we go into that, let's talk about why I do it instead of using a calendar and an app. Calendars and apps are not bad as a guide, but they are definitely not specific for your zone, your region, or even your microclimate. That's the reason why I can't tell you when to plant, nor can anybody else or any video that's out there unless they live in your backyard or in your neighborhood. Because you see, calendars and apps go off of an average over the last 5, 10, or even 20 years. And it gives you a window of when you should be doing it. But those windows are not always correct. For an example, all of this out here about 8 weeks ago was covered in a foot of snow. And that's the first time that that's happened in over 120 years, which means if I would have stayed with my calendar of last year, I would have planted 3 weeks ago. If I would have planted 3 weeks ago based off of my calendar, I would have killed my entire spring crop. But by using the clues that nature gives me, I knew exactly when to plant. And I talked about using 4 temps, 50, 60, 70, and 80. So how do you get to the point where you can look outside your window and say, okay, I see this, I hear this, I smell this, I need to do this activity in the garden? Well, let's go ahead and start at the very beginning. The first thing you need to do is understand what you want to grow and what you can grow. So just Google real quick what vegetable grows in your specific area. Let's say what grows in North Georgia. Your ag extension office usually is going to have a list of what vegetables grow, and not only will they give you a list, but it'll give you specifically which type of carrot, pea, beans, beets, tomatoes is going to grow. So just write that down. Decide what you want to grow in your garden and what you're going to use. There's no use growing anything that you're not going to eat. And then secondly, once you get that list done, then just Google, when do I direct seed at what soil temps? Peas, carrots, broccoli. At what soil temps do I transplant tomatoes, peppers, eggplants? But just look at those, and you're going to see, as you do that research, you're going to see there's going to be 4 temps that are pretty critical. One is going to be the 50-degree mark, the 60-degree mark, the 70-degree mark, and the 80-degree mark. Now, what are those? You're usually going to find at 50 degrees, you're going to have down here, your peas, your carrots, your beets, your radishes. So at 50 degrees, that's when I plant those. At 60 degrees, I don't do anything. At 60 degrees, or at least out in the garden, I don't do anything. At 60 degrees, I know that it's time for me to start my seedlings indoors, and that's my tomatoes, my eggplants, and my peppers. Then at 70 degrees, I know to transplant my tomatoes. I know to start prepping the soil for my eggplants and my squash. Then also I have another little trick at 75 for me, just because I've done it for several years now. At 75, then I'm going to bring out my peppers, I'm going to bring out my eggplants, and I'm going to plant my squash. Then at 80 degrees, I am going to get ready for my summer garden, which is going to be my black-eyed peas, my okras, and my lima beans. But at each one of those temps, I see certain things. Like I said, it's all going to be up to you. It's not going to have anything to do with what I see, but I can give you some examples. So at 60 degrees, as a matter of fact, let's go out here for a walk. It's 60 degrees. I got to work on my deer fence because the deer just started showing up. So to start this, you're obviously going to need to know what your soil temperature is. So get a thermometer, either use something that's in your kitchen like I did. It goes down to about 40 degrees and it's absolutely fine. If you don't have anything that goes that low, you can order a soil thermometer from Amazon or pick one up at your garden center. So let's take a look at 50 degrees for me. At 50 degrees, there's not a lot of indicators out there of when you need to start planting certain plants. But for me, this buckwheat tree has been on this property for probably 2 to 3 decades. It just started blooming. So to me, that's an indication that my soil temps out there are at 50 degrees. I have an azalea bush out front that it just starts to bud when the soil temps at 50 degrees. There is dandelions out by my wood pile that show me that, hey, it's the soil temp in the garden, 50 degrees. It's 60 degrees. Well, I start seeing over here, it's already past that point, obviously, because the soil temps are a little different. But at 60 degrees, the very tip of this peach tree, it started to bloom. Over here, these pear trees, at 60 degrees, there wasn't any green leaves on them. But over here, these little petals, the blooms, started happening at 60 degrees. Now, 60 degrees for me doesn't mean that I do anything in the garden itself. What it does is it tells me that it's time to go inside and start my seedlings. It's 70 degrees, which is where we are right now. Like I said before, the wisteria is blooming in my front yard. The azaleas are in full bloom. I saw the first bumblebee. I saw the first butterfly, and this all happened in the last 3 days. Guess what? Check my soil temps. It's 70 degrees. It's time to get my tomato transplants in. Now at 75, I've kind of gotten a little more specific now, but I know if I wait just a little bit longer, my soil temps are at 75, then I can get out my eggplants and I can get out my peppers. But what's the indication for that? Well, when lightning bugs start moving from the creek and they get out here into this field, my soil temp in my garden's at 75 degrees. When I have those bluebirds are nesting in there, it's usually 75 degrees. When I'm starting to see blooms of a jasmine tree that's over there, the azalea bushes have started dropping their blooms. The rest of the lightning bugs have started to dwindle. They're not out in the garden as much. I'm also getting, for my early girl tomatoes that are over here, they'll almost be done because they bloom early, or they produce early, and they produce in about 45 days. Now, why do I do it this way? One, it's obviously it's more accurate and it's more specific to my garden. Two, having an app or a calendar that tells me I have to do something, to me, is just like having a job. I don't need any more pressure. But if I just start using the rhythms of nature and just kind of going with what it tells me to do, it's a little more calming. It takes a little more anxiety out of the idea of, did I guess right? Did I plan correctly? Well, nature's not going to lie to you. It's been doing it for centuries. Now, this is my 3rd year of doing it here, and I can tell you the first year of planting was guesswork. And I understand what you beginners are going through. It was guesswork. It was angst. It was anticipation. It was self-doubt. Did I do it on time? It was really stressful. But I made those notes. 2nd year, got those notes just a little bit more dialed in. This year, going off of the signals that Mother Nature gives me, and it has been such a pleasure to do. I hope that you get to that point. I hope that you start looking around, getting your notes and your clues. If you have those clues, or if you've been using this in the past, if you've been a gardener doing this for years, leave those in the comments section below. I'm sure we would just get a blast out of hearing what you said. I know that my granddad, the first time that I heard about doing this, I was about 5 years old. My granddad came walking into the farmhouse and he said, well, it's time to plant the corn, because I just saw the robin, and I was thinking either granddad has gone nuts or maybe he's got a robin that can talk. And I went out in the garden trying to find a robin that could talk, and well, obviously that didn't work. But what have you heard in the past? What are some of the things that you're doing? Or what have you heard some of the things some people say? I'd be interested to see. I hope this video helped. I'm Greg from Bell's Backyard. I hope to see you in the backyard soon.